Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Forman. We have Real Team Rider Cody Craig with us. Cody, welcome.
Thank you.
And we are here today to talk about the CI Log, a collaboration with Channel Islands' Devin Howard and shaper Wayne Rich, produced by Channel Islands. And talking a little bit about this board, Devin has a very strong, I think, direct vision of kind of like what he likes in boards, and obviously he's an incredible surfer. From a longboard perspective and also a mid-length perspective. But with this board, he had a clear vision of what he wanted, and also to bring like a longboard into the Channel Islands lineup. And there's a lot of content out there, on the internet about it. So go check that out. But what we want to talk about is obviously our impressions of the board, surfing it here in Cape Hatteras, also surfing it in Rincon in California with Devin. And talk a little bit about the shape as well. Now, Cody, I know that you know Devin, and also you have a relationship with Wayne, right? Wayne Rich?
Yeah, I have a pretty good relationship with Wayne. Growing up on the Central Coast in California, he was a huge influence on me. I would take trips down to Rincon and see him, out there riding his shapes and perfecting, some logs and just doing kind of what not a lot of people were doing at the time, where there was just like these traditional logs or high pro logs. There was nothing really in between.
Right.
So you could see Wayno kind of taking that aspect and blending the two, which I really had a lot of respect for.
Okay, no, that's a great thing to talk about, because coming into this review, that's what I was thinking as well. Like, this board kind of, although it's called a traditional log,
right?
I think a lot of what Devin and Wayne put into it, the thought that they put into it that we're going to talk about, it kind of puts it in a uncharted middle ground, like between those two, because the traditional log stuff is sort of harder to ride and like pretty particular on how you ride it, and then obviously the high performance stuff was multi-fin, like rockered out. But this thing seems to fall like in a space that hasn't been taken up yet.
Yeah, I think it definitely has its own space in your surfboard repertoire if you want to have a board that's more versatile in turning and not just nose riding, because it's not necessarily just a nose rider.
Okay.
The board can actually turn and flow through turns and the waves. So I feel like they did a really nice job of blending the two. One
of the things that Devin talks about is like the rail profile on this board, like with that downturned but still soft rail out the back, and he talks a lot about like a traditional longboard like does not have an edge,
right? Like
out the tail. You want to talk a little bit about that in your experience, like edge versus no edge, and like kind of what that does?
Well, I feel like in the late 90s and 80s, their boards turned to more high performance, and so they would have more harder edges throughout the board. And as we come into the 2000s, people kind of wanted to go more traditional. I think Joel Tudor was a big influence on that. So a lot of the boards now are, have a softer rail. It's more forgiving. On a high pro, you have to be on the edge, where this one you can kind of turn from more the middle of the board, and flow through turns. And it just looks a little more natural, where I think the high pro stuff has its place, but I think it looks a little bit jerky when you look at footage and stuff like that. It looks really forced. Where traditional logging is a little smoother and easier on the eye. Another
thing that we want to touch on is like sizing this board up, and so Devin is if you had like a scale of like size of surfers, he would be on the larger side.
Right.
6'1", 190-ish pounds, and he's riding out at Rincon, he's riding a 9'9". When we were picking the board for you for the review, we knew we wanted to go shorter, right, because of our shorter period waves and like kind of hollower waves.
Right.
We kind of started out at 9'6", but where did you end up size-wise?
So talking with Devin and Wayne, they were both kind of, influencing me or pushing me towards a 9'3" or 9'6". And I think with just the type of waves we have here in Cape Hatteras, it's a little more top to bottom, whereas where Devin's used to surfing is Rincon, and the wave is a little more almond shaped.
Yeah.
So there's just a different pocket here, and it's deeper. So I figured a smaller board would help fit that contour of the wave better.
Okay.
I'm 5'11", 185 pounds.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely a bigger surfer, maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely not a Grom size. So I like riding a little bit heavier boards. It doesn't really faze me. I like the way that they glide into waves and get into waves easier. So I feel like this is a good blend.
And so this is a 9.0, right?
So I ended up
9.0.
going with a 9.0.
Okay.
Yeah, and after talking with Wayne on the phone, I think he understood where I'm coming from and just the type of surf that we get here. So if you're surfing in New York or like Rockaway Beach or somewhere like that, you could probably use a longer board.
Yeah.
If you're surfing more beach break kind of punchy stuff, I definitely suggest a shorter longboard.
Yeah.
To kind of fit in the pocket better.
Yeah, I mean, because like having surfed here and Rincon, it's a whole different
Whole different playing field.
I mean, Rincon, you have hundreds of yards of wave in front of you.
Yeah.
Where here, a lot of times you don't have any wave in front of you.
And at Rincon, you can drop in at several different points in the wave, whereas here we have to kind of backdoor sections because that's the most critical part. And a lot of times out on the shoulder, the wave is done and there's no speed. So we kind of have a certain spot where we have to surf.
So on paper, again, like kind of rewinding to like when we chose this board for you, the 9.0. On paper, like looking at the numbers, I think people are preconditioned to think like, okay, 9.0, that's for like really small people. Like it's just in your head. Like, okay, that's what like a smaller female surfer or a smaller guy is gonna surf, but like not somebody your size.
Yeah, just because it's 9.0 doesn't mean it's for a Grom.
Exactly.
It definitely, you can be surfed by a smaller person who's not as big as me, but I feel like the board has such small increments in sizes where the thickness only goes up maybe a 1/16 of an inch in each size difference. So between the 9.0 and the 9.3, I think this is 3 inches thick, and the 9.3 is 3 1/16.
Yeah.
So there's not that much difference. It's just longer.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I remember that when we were like when we actually got down to like these two being, it was like 9.0 versus 9.3, 9.6 is out. When we had them underneath our arm, like they felt very similar. Like it wasn't like one was like chipped out and like super low volume.
Not at all.
Really close.
And I like that Channel Islands has done that. It just kind of narrows things down a lot more. And I feel like I could ride a 9.9 or a 9.6 at a Rincon or a Malibu type of wave. Yeah. And that extra length is more stepping, so you're going to have to walk more board, which it's an interesting conversation, the length, because like most of the times, like, okay, you're a big guy, you're 9'6", 9'9", you're a medium guy, you're 9, and so you're like kind of locked into that. I feel like we're kind of conditioned to think that.
But now it's, as people are looking at this board and then applying it to the waves that they're going to be surfing at home, like they can be a little bit more open-minded.
Absolutely.
As to what size they get. Let's talk about like your impressions on the board. I mean, you've been looking at the wax on this board. You've been surfing this thing a lot.
Yeah.
And I think you've been surfing this thing a lot in conditions like where people wouldn't think you'd be surfing this board at all.
Right.
And so let's talk about your impressions and kind of like the sessions you've had on it.
So like I was able to get in pretty early on waves, and like I said, the waves in Cape Hatteras do typically break a little more top to bottom. So it was really nice to kind of backdoor sections, and I felt comfortable with my rail line setting into a wave and maybe pulling into a barrel or two, and then coming out and feeling comfortable walking up, to the tip, maybe getting a cheater 5 or a turn to cut back into the pocket. So I felt really comfortable on this board. Just knowing that Wayne shaped it or helped design it really gave me the confidence to know like I can do this in this part of the wave. And so I really enjoyed trying this board out, and not necessarily like forcing nose rides. I don't think that it has to be a nose rider. It's both, what I mean? And I like that compromise. I feel like you either have a nose rider that nose rides that doesn't turn as well, or you have the high pro or a board that has a lot of edge that just turns and feels sketchy on the nose.
Right.
So this has the blend of both, and I really enjoyed that. I feel like it's a really versatile board of traditional and turn ability, maneuverability.
Like watching you surf it and watching Devin surf it as well, like you can see how much thought was put into the turning aspect of it, without it being a multi-fin, like high-performance longboard, and it's a way smoother turn, like a way more powerful, smooth, like lengthened out turn. And in talking with Devin about the board, I mean, that's a lot of that thought, the turning aspect of it went into, like with the way they did the rail shaping out the back, like to have that downturn soft edge rather than like having the thing be 50-50.
So you'll see on the side of the board, like they have a pretty soft rail all the way through the board, and then right at the tail they have a kind of a downturn rail. So it's like a mid turn, you know, a slight turn on the tail, which really helps with the turning and maneuverability.
Yeah, but still no hard edge.
But still no hard edge, yeah. Okay. So
I mean, and the one when I got to surf Devin's board, so like I met up with Devin at Rincon, which was cool. I mean, he loaned me. He's like, yeah, I'll meet you there, and he like loaned me not board number 2, but his second best 9.9. Of course, he's going to ride the number 1,
best,
right?
Yeah.
But he loaned me his second best 9.9, and then he also loaned me his triplane hull 7.1.
Okay.
And right out of the blocks, like the thing that impressed me a lot about this board is like a lot of times like traditional logs are harder, like they're more, I don't know, you have to like dial them in, like you know.
So they're
like
super specified to nose riding, and then maybe not turning so much. I feel like
they just feel like you don't feel at home on them the first session, and this thing like. Wave number 1, like you felt like you had surfed it a lot already, like it felt super comfortable and really confident.
Yeah, the learning curve isn't so drastic.
Right.
I feel like. So
and also like the turning ability, like blew like a traditional log away, like the ability to turn it and like how it felt like through the turns.
Yeah, you can tell how it's thinned out in the nose, and it's got like a nice concave in there. So I feel like that helps with lift for nose riding and just pulling the board around. When you have a board with a big heavy nose or a thicker nose up in the front, it's harder to turn back into cutbacks.
Yep.
You're not going to get fluid turns, you know, and fluid cutbacks and bottom turns. So I feel like that really helps, having it kind of chiseled out in the nose. The concave takes a little bit of volume out as well.
And what about like if you're moving the wide point back and the nose is like narrower and thinner, like are you feeling like at your level, are you feeling that reduction in weight, like when you're swinging the thing around, like
absolutely
from the tail?
Yeah, if you think of a pendulum, how a pendulum kind of switches, you know, he brought the wide point back from center of the board.
Yeah.
So you have more turning surface area back on the tail, so it's very forgiving, and yet a little bit narrower in the nose, it maneuvers a lot better from the tail, where I feel like a fuller nose the rail would catch more.
The rail, like the area of the nose is going to catch.
Yes.
So you got like a weight thing, but also like a reduction in the area.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk about like the size of surf, you know, that you surfed it in. You know, like my first question is going to be like, okay, so you're above average in size, but you went below average in the size of the board, right? Like how did it work in small waves, like in the dribble?
I thought it worked really well. So it definitely paddled well. The rocker placement, it has rocker, so it's not like some boards are just really flat.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are good for maybe only nose riding, where this one has just the right amount of rocker. So you can take steeper drops, you know what I mean? You'll see in some of the video, I'll be kind of drop kneeing or pig dogging into, you know, waves on my backside. And this rail line, this thinner rail line, I feel like helps that transition from dropping into a steeper section and feeling confident with your rail engaging at the bottom of the wave. And also not letting your fin slip out or your tail lift up too much. The thinner board has the right amount of flex, so when you do get on the nose, the tail wants to engage with the rail and the steeper section of the wave.
Why don't you talk, Cody, share your thoughts on like nose riding ability of this board, right, versus like a dedicated nose rider, and like kind of where in the wave they both work.
So I feel like this board really fits well in the pocket. And when I say pocket, I just mean like the steeper part of the wave where the power is. So you definitely feel more control when you're riding on the tail and you're setting up for those nose rides, or you're setting up for those bottom turns and sweep around cutbacks. Whereas maybe a thicker, more traditional longboard or nose rider, I should say, you have to be further out on the face, further out in, you know, away from the pocket zone, I should say. So I feel like this board works the best, has the most control when you're in the pocket. It also glides through sections and flat spots in the wave, but I feel like it works best in the more critical part of the wave.
Okay, like as far as like learning to nose ride, because I think a lot of people that might be watching this video, like, you know, a lot of times like longboards like straight up scare people, right?
Sure,
like
absolutely.
They were kind of bred on like 8-footers, and then they went smaller before they went longer.
Well, and there's a lot of gray area too, where, you know, people, especially coming from a shortboard background, your typical stance is, you know, is set. So I feel like you have to kind of reset when you ride a longboard anyways, and just kind of let some of that shortboard stuff go. And really just kind of feel the flow of the board where it wants to go. You don't necessarily always have to be back on the tail of the board. That's why I kind of ride my fin up a little bit, not necessarily all the way back, just because you're able to turn the board from the center or from the mid part of the board.
Okay.
A lot of turns don't have to be super critical. They're just check turns. You're just climbing and dropping. Having a board with the fin up a little bit helps you do that. Fin all the way back is definitely going to be a little more stable, especially on the tail.
Right, right.
But I feel for just like mid turns and check turns, this fin placement works really well.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I mean the reason I ask on on those subtle adjustments and the cross stepping and stuff, because it's neat seeing some of the people that are like surfing this board and full, like kind of progressing on it, like that guy up in New York, Yuri from Skipper Surf Review, like he got one of these things in a 9.3, and it's basically like he's new to longboarding, other than like when he very first learned how to surf, but like actual like cross stepping and properly like riding this board is new to him, even though he's got a good surf level on his other boards.
Sure.
And I think the more people that get exposed to learning how to do those things, like it's a good thing for their own surfing, 'Cause
Absolutely.
I see how versatile you are in your quiver, like riding everything from like a foil board to a small fish, like to these, to to barrel boards and short boards and everything, and you're able to use your quiver for the waves that are presented to you, rather than like try and make something work or just be disgruntled.
Yeah, that's why I drive a Honda CRV, because that was a prerequisite, is that a longboard could fit inside the car. And like I have surf racks, but like I only use them for certain occasions. I like to have a longboard, mid-length, a gun, and maybe a fish and a shortboard. I travel with at least 4 boards typically on every session.
Ready to go.
Ready to go. You just never know what the waves are going to be like. The tide might drop. It might get a little drainier, and you want your shortboard or your fish. So yeah, it really just depends. Things can change in a few hours here on the East Coast with the tide switch.
Let's talk about, we talked about the small stuff, and you're saying 9.0 works for you, like even in the minuscule waves. And then what about on the bigger side? Like what was the more powerful surf that you rode this thing in, like size wise or kind of shape wise?
I think the biggest that I rode it in was probably that session with you at the lighthouse.
Okay.
Where it was more kind of almost like a point break, but it definitely had a tube section right off the bat.
Yeah.
A little racier, kind of fast in some sections. So that was probably the biggest surf I rode it in. I think I had it a day down south that was probably a little bit bigger, and it definitely handled really well, even in the bigger surf. So I thought it was more of a small wave board, where now I'm realizing you could ride it in overhead surf as well. Definitely really stable, and catches waves.
Okay.
So even on the 9-footer, I feel like it's a great wave catcher.
Let's talk about the fin. So you've got the Channel Islands 9.5.
So yeah,
CI log fin in it.
Devin sent me a 9.5 and a 10-inch CI fin.
Okay.
And I chose the 9.5. I just felt like that might be a little bit looser, and I was willing to kind of give up a little bit of looseness for stableness. And what they've done with the fins, I feel like they have a nice rake to it. It kind of has like a Greeno rake. Yeah. And you were saying it's kind of compared to
like a 4A.
A 4A
it's close
fin.
to the 4A. I think this one's got a little bit more tip area though.
It has a decent sized base, closer, it's kind of a blend between a pivot fin and a nice raked back fin. Yeah. So I feel like they did that on purpose, because they want it to be they want it to nose ride, but they also want it to turn. Yep. So you kind of have the best of both worlds in that fin. So I would highly recommend using the fin that Channel Islands.
Yeah. Because it was designed together.
It was designed for this board.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Cody, anything else you want to share, with the audience on the CI log?
I just want to say thanks to Uncle Wayne, Wayne Rich Surfboards in Santa Barbara, and Devin for just giving me the opportunity to try these boards, and also Trip here at Real Watersports. I just feel really fortunate to try these different boards and, expose them, like the really good points that they have, so that other people can enjoy them as well. If you're transitioning from a shortboard to a longboard, I feel like this is a really safe bet, just because Channel Islands has a great reputation of being able to get on a board and ride it right away. So the learning curve It is not super tough. It's a great board to have in your quiver if you want to be able to do turns and you not necessarily like a great longboarder, but you want to get better at cross stepping.
Yeah.
This is a good board for that. So
yeah, because it's not just cross stepping. It's not just going to the nose and back and going to the nose and back.
It's about trimming and finding the right space in the wave to do turns and figuring out just your posture and like how to ride a longboard. If you're used to shortboarding, you're used to a little lower center of gravity, where I feel like you can kind of loosen up on this board. That's why I was saying to kind of reset when you try to ride a longboard. We have more of a kind of an upright stance, and I think you have more leverage that way. So your turns are smoother. You can bury the rail harder when you're a little more upright with your knees just slightly bent.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Awesome, Cody. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for sharing all the insight on this board. For those of you out there, if anyone has any additional questions on the Channel Islands CI log or would like to place an order for one, either stock or custom, you can always reach us at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.